The desert dawn stretched across Arizona like a canvas painted in pale gold and dusty rose. The air was crisp, carrying a faint scent of fuel and metal from the sprawling Air Force Base. Shadows of hangars stretched long across the tarmac, and the faint hum of engines warming filled the morning. Lieutenant Rachel Sparrow Matthews pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, stepping out of the barracks with a measured breath. She was the new girl, the rookie everyone had already sized up, whispered about, and dismissed before she'd even drawn a flight plan. Her boots clicked sharply against the concrete, echoing off the hangars. In the shadows, other pilots, some seasoned veterans, others mid-level cadets, watched her every move. The air was thick with the kind of judgment that could paralyze a less determined person. Whispers trailed behind her like smoke. Does she even know which end of the joystick is up? Bet she'll be shaking in the cockpit by the first turn. Just a new girl, that's all. Sparrow ignored them. She had heard this before. In every squadron she'd been part of during flight school, someone had mocked her abilities or assumed she was fragile. She had learned to carry their doubt like armor. Her hazel eyes, calm and focused, swept across the line of jets glinting in the morning sun. Each plane seemed to hum with silent expectation, daring her to prove herself. The F-15 she was assigned to gleamed silver under the rising sun. It looked sleek, almost predatory, and her heart thudded, not with fear but anticipation. She climbed into the cockpit, her fingers brushing over the controls, feeling the familiar cold metal, the smoothness of the panels. Her hands, though small, were steady. Years of training, simulations, and long nights studying aircraft systems had led to this moment. Yet even with preparation, she knew every flight carried risk. A veteran pilot, Captain Daniels, leaned against a hangar wall nearby, smirking. "First sortie, Matthews. You ready to embarrass yourself?" he called out. Other pilots snickered. Sparrow didn't flinch. She adjusted her helmet, clipped it into place, and replied calmly, almost mockingly, "You'll see soon enough." Inside the cockpit, she ran pre-flight checks, each step methodical, precise. Lights flickered across the panel, engines purred to life, and the vibrations thrummed through the fuselage like the heartbeat of a predator. Sparrow's mind focused entirely on the procedures she had memorized, on the feel of the stick on every gauge. But then, a warning light blazed red on the dashboard, a hydraulic system alert. A chill ran down her spine, but she swallowed it. Her instructors had drilled her in scenarios like this, every failure accounted for in theory. But the real test, that came when the alarms were real and the plane shook beneath your hands. Sparrow's fingers flew over the backup switches, toggling systems, rerouting hydraulics, running the checklist in her head. Around her, other cadets glanced nervously at the flashing warning, but Sparrow's focus never wavered. Outside, the wind picked up, lifting dust and small debris across the tarmac. A few pilots wandered closer, curious to see the rookie handle the situation. "She'll never manage it," muttered one quietly, almost to himself. Sparrow ignored them, her hazel eyes scanning instruments, mental calculations running faster than the speed of thought. She whispered under her breath, "Stay calm, trust yourself." As the engines roared to full power, she taxied onto the runway. The F-15 seemed almost alive beneath her, vibrating in response to her touch. Other pilots watched, some smirking, some uneasy, as Sparrow lifted off in a controlled ascent. The desert stretched endlessly below, the sun now rising, casting the landscape in a fiery glow. The moment was cinematic, almost surreal. The rookie, airborne, engines screaming, alarm lights still pulsing, but Sparrow's focus never wavered. Then came the first real challenge. The hydraulic warning hadn't just been a test. A real malfunction caused the control surfaces to stiffen. The plane shuddered violently with every maneuver. Sparrow's heart raced, but she didn't panic. Her fingers adjusted the manual override, her body leaning with every subtle shift of the aircraft. Each correction was measured, deliberate, almost instinctual. The veterans watching could see her skill, but disbelief clouded their expressions. Captain Daniels barked into his radio, "Abort! Eject if you need to." His voice carried authority, but Sparrow shook her head, her voice calm and steady as she responded, "Negative. I've got this." A tense silence fell over the base. The mockery faded into uncertainty. Nobody expected the new girl to challenge the situation with such poise. She banked the plane through the maneuvers, adjusting for the failing hydraulics, navigating turbulence, and keeping the F-15 almost unnervingly steady. Each second stretched like an eternity. The desert below blurred in streaks of gold and brown, a reminder of how far she could fall if she made a mistake. Even the other cadets who had mocked her now leaned closer to watch, their whispers replaced with awe. Sparrow's mind was a mix of concentration and calm, every control input calculated, every adjustment precise. She was fighting the plane, yes, but more than that, she was fighting expectations, preconceptions, the weight of being underestimated. When she finally leveled the aircraft after a series of sharp turns and altitude adjustments, the base exhaled collectively. Sparrow's landing gear extended manually with slight protest, but she guided the plane smoothly back toward the runway. Engines screamed, dust swirled, and the silver jet touched down with sparks dancing across the tarmac. As she rolled to a stop, Sparrow unbuckled her harness slowly, taking in the faces of the veterans. There was silence at first, broken by the faint hiss of cooling engines. Then one of the senior pilots muttered under his breath, almost incredulously, "Call sign Sparrow." She lifted her helmet, letting her hair fall across her shoulders, and offered a faint, confident smile. "Sparrow, always Sparrow." Even as the applause from some cadets broke through the tense quiet, a flicker of doubt remained in the veterans' eyes. They had seen a rookie perform a near-impossible maneuver, but none of them knew what she would do next. Sparrow's gaze swept over the hangar, the runway, the desert beyond, and she knew this was only the beginning. Every flight, every challenge, every mocking whisper ahead would now be measured against her skill, her composure, and her call sign. The sun climbed higher, bathing the base in sharp light. Engines rumbled in the distance as other pilots prepared for their sorties. But all anyone could talk about, quietly, in awe, was the new girl. The one they mocked, the one who had just conquered the impossible, the one they would now watch very carefully. And somewhere above the desert in the clear Arizona sky, Lieutenant Rachel Matthews whispered to herself, steady and resolute, "This is only the beginning." The hangar buzzed with a low hum as mechanics checked engines, pilots prepared for briefings, and the scent of jet fuel hung in the air like a metallic fog. Sparrow walked past, her boots echoing against concrete, each step measured, each breath steady. But behind her, whispers followed like shadows. "Bet she'll never keep formation with the F-22s, one veteran muttered. "They'll have her eating their jet wash in 10 minutes. Sparrow ignored the murmurs. She had learned long ago that listening to naysayers only slowed you down. Instead, she focused on the mission briefing flashing on the screens. A joint aerial exercise with the elite F-22 pilots, testing precision formation, mid-air maneuvers, and simulated engagement. The F-22 pilots were legends, slick, disciplined, and ruthless in the air. And today, Sparrow would fly alongside them for the first time. Her F-15, polished and humming, waited on the tarmac. She climbed in, checked instruments, and ran pre-flight protocols with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years memorizing every procedure. Every flickering light, every dial, every gauge was familiar, but nerves bubbled beneath the surface. Not fear, anticipation. She wanted to prove herself. "Hey, new girl," called out Lieutenant Harris, a cocky pilot with a smirk that never left his face. "Try not to crash before we even reach altitude." His laugh was sharp, biting, meant to sting. Sparrow's gaze didn't waver. She didn't answer. Let them talk. Actions spoke louder than words. As the F-15s taxied to the runway, the F-22s streaked across the sky, sleek and powerful, their pilots radiating confidence. The F-22s roared past in formation, their silhouettes cutting across the morning sun like predators. Sparrow's fingers tightened on the throttle. Her plane vibrated beneath her, alive with power. She took a deep breath, centering herself. "Formation flight, altitude 35,000, came the radio command. Sparrow's heart thumped in rhythm with the engines. She adjusted her controls, aligning herself with the F-22s. The other cadets snickered over the comms. "Keep up, Sparrow. Don't get lost." Sparrow's voice was calm, measured. "Copy that. Maintaining formation." For a moment all seemed normal. The sun gleamed off metal, the desert stretched endlessly beneath them, and the roar of engines filled the sky. But then, a subtle jolt, a warning light flashing red on her dashboard. Her stomach sank slightly as she recognized the familiar flash: hydraulics failure. Her pulse accelerated, but her face remained calm. Not panic, focus. Check systems, backup protocols. Her fingers moved almost automatically, rerouting hydraulic lines, activating auxiliary systems. The F-22 pilots flying beside her began to notice the subtle stagger in her plane. "New girl's lagging," whispered one F-22 pilot over comms. "She's not keeping formation. Should we call it off?" Another shook his head. "Watch her, something happening." Sparrow gritted her teeth. She could feel the jet shudder with each maneuver, controls stiff, responses delayed. She adjusted throttle and rudder, compensating manually. Sweat pricked her forehead beneath her helmet, but her voice remained steady over the radio. "Sparrow, manual override engaged. Maintaining course." The other pilots exchanged uneasy glances. None of the rookies they'd trained with had ever stayed calm under a real hydraulic failure at 35,000 feet. Most would have ejected the moment the warning lights blinked. But Sparrow was not most rookies. Her F-15 bucked and tilted slightly, veering toward the edge of the formation. Harris's voice cut through the radio, sharp and mocking. "Lost your bird, Matthews. Going down with style." Sparrow inhaled deeply, her eyes flicking to the artificial horizon. No, not going down. With precise adjustments to the stick, she corrected her trajectory, returning to near-perfect alignment with the F-22s. Her hands flew over the controls, muscles taut, instincts firing faster than thought. The elite pilots flying beside her stiffened. One muttered, almost in disbelief, She's compensating for hydraulics manually." Sparrow's fingers danced across backup switches, toggling pressure valves, adjusting flaps incrementally. Every adjustment was a gamble, every maneuver a battle against the failing system. The radio crackled again, voices barking warnings. "Eject! Eject!" She shook her head. "Negative, continuing mission, Sparrow." Sweat ran down her temple, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it, focusing entirely on the aircraft beneath her hands. The desert stretched below, unyielding, reminding her of the stakes. One miscalculation, one delayed input, and the plane could spiral into disaster. But Sparrow had trained for this. Every simulation, every night in the simulator, every drilled emergency procedure, she had faced them all. And now, in the unforgiving sky, all her preparation converged. The F-22 pilots, known for their arrogance and confidence, began to watch more closely. They saw a rookie maneuver a failing F-15 with precision and calm. Her adjustments were small but perfect, her timing flawless. Even in the face of derision and doubt, she maintained control. "New girl, she's not just surviving. She's handling it," one pilot whispered, awe creeping into his voice. Sparrow's jaw tightened and a focused calm settled over her. She toggled switches to bypass failing hydraulics entirely, switching to the backup manual system. The plane responded, albeit sluggishly, but it responded. With painstaking precision, she began stabilizing the aircraft, bringing it back into perfect formation with the F-22s. Harris's mocking tone had gone silent. Even the veterans muttering insults moments before now watched, unsure what to say. Their skepticism was giving way to disbelief. Sparrow's voice over the comms was calm, almost serene, maintaining formation. No further issues anticipated. There was a pause, tense and stretched, where all radio chatter seemed to fade. The F-22 pilots glanced at one another, realizing that this rookie, this new girl, had performed what most would call impossible. She had turned a near-catastrophic system failure into controlled flight, holding formation with the most elite pilots in the sky. Below, the desert passed silently, indifferent to human drama, yet it had witnessed something extraordinary. A rookie, mocked and underestimated, was proving her skill under pressure. And up here, above 35,000 feet, her actions were rewriting every expectation. As they approached the exercise's conclusion, Sparrow adjusted throttle and rudder one final time, ensuring smooth alignment for the simulated engagement. The F-22 pilots nodded to each other subtly, a rare gesture of respect among the elite. They had witnessed something they would not forget. And for Sparrow, the mocking voices that had followed her from the hangar now seemed distant, powerless. She had flown through fear, ridicule, and mechanical failure and had emerged unshaken. But deep in her mind, she knew this was only the beginning. The day was far from over, and the real challenges, the ones that would test everything she had learned, were still ahead. As she guided the F-15 back toward the base for landing, one F-22 pilot's voice crackled over the radio, calm but unmistakably impressed. "New girl, call sign Sparrow. You just earned our attention." Sparrow's lips curved into a faint, confident smile. She had flown through mockery, fear, and failure, and she had survived. But the airfield below was still waiting, the next phase of her trial imminent. And the veterans, watching from the hangar, now wondered, who exactly is this Sparrow? Above them, the sky stretched endless and blue, the desert below silent but watchful. Sparrow flew on, unaware that the F-22 pilots she had just impressed were already recalculating everything they thought they knew about rookies. And in that moment, one thought pulsed clearly in her mind. They mocked me, underestimated me, and now they will never forget my call sign. The sky above the Arizona desert was a canvas of relentless blue, unmarred except for the thin trails of contrails left by F-22s streaking in formation. Sparrow's F-15 shuddered violently beneath her. The warning lights, persistent and unforgiving, screamed hydraulics failure, now no longer just a flicker. It was a full-blown system collapse. The plane groaned as if alive, complaining against the commands she issued. Her pulse raced, but she forced calm into her chest, into her lungs, into her hands. Every movement was precise, deliberate. Every second counted. Above 35,000 feet, even a fraction of error could send her spiraling to the desert floor. Sparrow knew this, and she knew there was no room for panic. "Control surfaces sluggish," she reported over comms, her voice measured. "Switching to auxiliary hydraulic bypass." There was silence on the other end. Even the F-22 pilots, elite veterans trained to face worst-case scenarios, paused. They had heard cadets crack under pressure before. They had never heard a rookie deliver information like this calmly, like a seasoned pilot commanding a fleet. "Manual override engaged," she added, her fingers dancing across toggles, switches, and backup systems. The cockpit rattled with each minor correction she applied. Sparks flickered faintly from a console as electricity hummed unevenly through circuits under strain. One F-22 pilot, call sign Raptor, broke the silence. "Is she really doing this? A rookie?" Another, grim and silent, adjusted his controls slightly, keeping formation but watching Sparrow closely. "She's compensating for hydraulics manually," he muttered. The words barely left his lips before radio chatter cut in. "Abort! Eject!" Sparrow's hazel eyes burned with focus. She shook her head, voice unwavering. "Negative, continuing mission. Sparrow." The desert far below seemed indifferent, vast and empty, but she felt its presence like a specter, reminding her of the consequences. One slip, one delayed response, and the desert would claim her F-15. But she refused to falter. Her hands worked instinctively, flipping switches she barely glanced at, cross-checking gauges, adjusting flaps, rudder and throttle with microcorrections only a seasoned pilot could execute. Sweat ran along her temple, stinging her eyes beneath the helmet, but she didn't flinch. Every movement was a negotiation with the aircraft, coaxing it to respond despite the failing hydraulics. The F-22 pilots tightened formation, wary now. They had seen rookies attempt maneuvers before, but never with composure under real-life failure. Sparrow's F-15 dipped slightly, and a low groan of metal-on-metal vibrated through the fuselage. Yet she corrected it with a deft flick of the stick, leveling the wings with precision. Behind her, Harris muttered under his breath, a hint of disbelief in his tone. "How is she even still in the air?" Sparrow ignored the comment, eyes fixed on the artificial horizon. She ran through her emergency checklist in her mind, every step drilled to perfection. Flaps manual, auxiliary hydraulics active, landing gear bypass check. She was flying blind, relying on instinct and muscle memory to keep the jet from becoming a projectile of metal and fire. Her heart thudded in rhythm with the vibrating fuselage. Time seemed to dilate, every second stretching into eternity. The desert floor rushed closer in her peripheral vision. Her palms were slick on the control stick, but her movements were steady, almost serene. She whispered under her breath, "Focus, control, precision." The F-22 pilots watched in awe as Sparrow stabilized her plane enough to maintain formation. One muttered, "She's handling it, manually, like a veteran." The words carried disbelief and respect, a combination rarely witnessed in the elite ranks. Sparrow knew the landing was the next challenge, the real test of her skill and nerve. But for now, she had to survive the emergency. Every correction she made, every system she toggled, was a negotiation with death and metal. The plane shuddered violently, then responded, slowly but obediently. Radio chatter erupted again. "Eject, eject. Abandon plane. Don't push it." She ignored the panic. Her voice cut through the static, unwavering, negative, maintaining control, Sparrow. Around her, the other cadets, her squadron, watched in stunned silence. They had expected chaos, a rookie to spiral out of control. Instead, they saw her coaxing the failing aircraft through impossible maneuvers, her skill evident in every subtle correction. Sparrow banked sharply, dodging imaginary threats in the simulated engagement. The F-22s followed her lead, their skepticism giving way to astonishment. She executed a series of maneuvers that would have challenged even experienced pilots: tight turns, controlled dives, and near-stall recoveries. Each one tested the limits of both her plane and her composure. Then the true test arrived. A gust of wind hit her wing unexpectedly, rocking the F-15 hard. The jet groaned, hydraulics struggling to respond. Sparrow's stomach clenched, but her hands never wavered. She compensated with minute adjustments, countering the wind, stabilizing the plane with near-invisible precision. One of the F-22 pilots' voices trembled slightly. She's not panicking, she's extraordinary." Sparrow's lips pressed into a thin line as she surveyed her instruments, calculating altitude, speed, and control surface response. Every parameter had to be monitored, every deviation corrected instantly. One wrong move could send her plummeting to the desert floor. And yet she moved like water, fluid and precise, melding with the plane's movements, anticipating its resistance and guiding it gently back into obedience. The sun glinted off her helmet visor as her jet leveled once more, formation restored, hydraulics partially compensated, alarms still flashing but under control. Silence settled briefly over the radio. The only sounds were the whine of engines and the distant roar of F-22s. Sparrow exhaled slowly, her body tense but her mind sharp. She had survived the emergency for now. But she knew this was just the first battle. The landing would be far more dangerous, a true test of skill against a compromised aircraft. She glanced down at the desert floor miles below and felt the enormity of what she had just achieved. The plane had been failing, alarms screaming, chaos threatening at every turn, and yet she had kept control. Her voice over the comms was calm, almost serene, hydraulics partially restored, maintaining course, preparing for approach. The F-22 pilots, seasoned and battle-hardened, were visibly impressed. One muttered to another, "I've flown with rookies before, but never like this." Another nodded silently, eyes fixed on the small, determined F-15 struggling, but surviving among the elite fighters. They were witnessing a rookie rewrite the rules of expectation, a pilot who had taken chaos and molded it into controlled flight. Sparrow's thoughts were singular. The plane, the systems, the landing, everything else faded. Fear, mockery, doubt, all irrelevant. Only control mattered, only survival. As the base came into view below, the tension stretched. Every second carried weight. Every correction could be the difference between triumph and disaster. And the F-22 pilots, watching closely, now understood what her call sign meant. Sparrow, small, underestimated, yet precise, swift, and deadly in skill. And in that moment, a realization settled over the formation. The rookie they mocked had become the pilot they would remember. But the final challenge, the landing, was still ahead. The desert stretched endlessly below, a quilt of burnt ochre and dusty gold, while the sun climbed higher, casting the F-15 and the elite F-22s in sharp relief. Sparrow's jet groaned with every adjustment she made. The hydraulics were no longer a flicker of concern. They were failing, unpredictable, testing the limits of her skill. Yet her focus was absolute. Each muscle in her body responded instinctively, each movement calculated. She was both pilot and machine, moving in a symphony of precision and control. Over the comms, voices crackled in alarm. "Abort! Eject now, Matthews! You're risking the airframe!" Harris barked, desperation creeping into his usual mockery. Sparrow shook her head. Her hazel eyes, calm yet burning with resolve, scanned instruments and horizon alike. "Negative. Initiating manual approach. Sparrow." The words were simple, but they carried weight. This wasn't just defiance. It was the declaration of skill born from years of discipline and training. Even the F-22 pilots, known for their unshakable confidence, stiffened. They had flown with some of the best in the Air Force, yet a rookie calmly claiming control under a real hydraulic failure was almost unheard of. "Did she just say manual approach?" whispered one of the F-22 pilots, disbelief plain in his voice. Another tightened his grip on the controls. "She's serious. She's doing this." Sparrow began the descent, each foot of altitude a calculated step toward survival. The auxiliary hydraulics groaned, struggling under the stress, but she guided the plane with deft micro-adjustments. Each flick of the stick countered unpredictable movements of the wings. The aircraft responded sluggishly, yet she coaxed it as if she could feel its metal spine beneath her fingertips. The F-22s formed a protective arc around her, flying slightly above and behind, a silent chorus of verification and support. They didn't interfere, they couldn't, but their presence was a tacit acknowledgement of her skill. The rook, the girl they had mocked, was rewriting what they thought possible in flight. "Keep steady, steady, steady," Sparrow muttered to herself, almost rhythmically as if chanting a mantra. She banked slightly to adjust for crosswinds. The plane groaned. The flaps responded unevenly. She compensated minute by minute, second by second. Sweat trickled down her temples, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it. Focus was survival, panic was death. The desert below was indifferent to her struggle. Canyons and mesas stretched like endless obstacles, but Sparrow didn't see threats. She saw pathways. Every inch of the F-15's descent was calculated to maintain control despite failing systems. Harris's voice, sharp and incredulous, cut through the radio again. "Matthews, this isn't training. You could die down there." Sparrow's voice was steady, unwavering. "I've done this before, Sparrow. Manual approach confirmed, maintaining control." The F-22 pilots exchanged glances, their skepticism dissolving into awe. One muttered, "She's not just surviving, she's controlling it like a veteran." Sparrow began lining up with the runway, the most difficult part of the emergency yet. With hydraulics partially unresponsive, landing gear manual, and flaps sluggish, Even small errors could send the plane spinning into disaster. Her mind ran through the checklist instinctively, executing steps with fluid precision. She toggled backup systems, adjusted throttle, fine-tuned rudder input, and coaxed the failing jet toward alignment. "Adjust left rudder, flaps 1, flaps 2, hold steady," she whispered under her breath, each command a prayer of control. Sparks flickered faintly from an auxiliary panel. Instruments blinked erratically. Alarms screamed. The plane shuddered, bucking under resistance, but she held firm. The F-22 pilots watched in astonishment as she stabilized the aircraft. Even as the rookie's jet lurched, it followed her commands perfectly, responding to adjustments made almost invisibly. They had seen pilots with 20 years' experience struggle under failure like this. Sparrow had not just survived, she had commanded the impossible. Harris's disbelief was almost tangible over the radio. How are you even in the air?" Sparrow ignored him, eyes locked on the runway stretching ahead like a lifeline. Every detail was crucial: altitude, approach angle, wind speed, landing gear alignment. One miscalculation, one delayed input, and the desert below would claim her F-15. But she was ready. The final approach demanded split-second decisions. The plane wobbled, fighting the failing hydraulics, threatening to roll. Sparrow tilted the wings with micro-adjustments, feathered the throttle to compensate, and manually extended the landing gear. Sparks flew as the tires groaned against resistance, the jet vibrating violently under her touch. "Steady, steady, steady," she repeated under her breath. The runway grew closer. The desert seemed to hold its breath, the distant mountains silent witnesses to the unfolding miracle. The F-22s maintained formation, watching, ready to respond if the worst happened, but none of them could interfere. All they could do was observe as the rookie guided her failing aircraft toward the runway with absolute precision. Harris's voice broke into silence again, this time tinged with awe. She's actually doing it." Sparrow adjusted throttle one final time, nudged rudder slightly, and aligned the jet perfectly with the runway. The auxiliary hydraulics squealed in protest, but the aircraft held. She began touchdown, the tires screaming against asphalt, sparks flying from friction. The jet shuddered, threatening to veer, but she maintained control, rolling to a stop with near-perfect composure. Silence followed. The only sounds were cooling engines and the faint rattle of instruments. Sparrow exhaled slowly, unbuckled, and finally allowed herself a moment to absorb the reality. She had flown the impossible. The F-22 pilots, hovering nearby in formation, slowly removed their helmets, faces a mixture of astonishment and respect. One voice broke through, calm but undeniably impressed. "Call sign Sparrow. That rookie just redefined the rules of flight." Whispers spread across the base. "Did you see that? She actually landed it. The new girl Sparrow." Inside the hangar, veterans who had mocked her earlier now stood in silent admiration. Even Harris's smirk had vanished, replaced by disbelief. They had underestimated her, and she had proved them all wrong. Sparrow climbed out of the cockpit, helmet in hand, sweat streaking her face but eyes alight with quiet satisfaction. Around her, the desert sky stretched endless and blue, a reminder that danger could strike again at any moment. But for now, she had survived. She had triumphed, and she had earned respect in a way no words could convey. Yet in her mind, a single thought persisted: this is only the beginning. Above her, the F-22 pilots lingered in formation, a silent acknowledgement of the skill they had witnessed. The new girl they mocked, the rookie, had flown a failing aircraft, executed a manual approach, and landed flawlessly. They would not forget her. And as Sparrow's call sign echoed across the comms, a new legend was quietly born in the skis of Arizona. The desert stretched beneath her like an endless, unforgiving ocean. Miles of ochre sand and jagged rock formations rolled out beneath Sparrow's F-15, her plane groaning under the strain of failing hydraulics and a system that refused to obey her commands completely. Each vibration echoed through the cockpit, a relentless reminder that one misstep could turn the silver jet into a flaming meteor over the desert. Sweat ran down Sparrow's temple, stinging her eyes beneath the helmet. She blinked, recalibrated her focus, and adjusted the throttle, nudging the aircraft into the shallowest glide possible. The sun glinted sharply off her instrument panels, throwing erratic shadows across her determined face. "Steady, steady, steady," she murmured, a mantra to keep fear from creeping into her muscles. Her fingers danced over switches and toggles with precision, commanding hydraulics that stubbornly resisted her control. She had practiced emergency landings, simulation after simulation, but nothing prepared her for the raw unpredictability of real failure at 35,000 feet. The F-22 pilots above and behind her maintained formation, eyes locked on the rookie's every move. They were silent now, no derision, no snickers, only tension and awe. They had flown with legends, yet they had never seen someone so young handle a failing aircraft with such skill, composure, and nerve. One of them muttered almost to himself, "She's not a rookie, she's extraordinary." Sparrow banked slightly to correct for crosswind gusts, feeling the aircraft resist her control inputs, its wings quivering beneath the uneven hydraulics. She had to anticipate every tremor, every bounce, every quiver of the frame. Failure to compensate by even a fraction of a degree could spell disaster. Altitude 5,000, 4,000, 3,000. She counted under her breath. Every foot mattered. Below, the desert spread like an unyielding expanse, the base small and distant but tantalizingly close. The ground crew had stopped in their tracks, craning their necks skyward. Their eyes widened as they watched the lone F-15 struggling but surviving. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others exchanged anxious glances, knowing the rookie pilot attempting this manual descent was defying all odds. "Flaps manual, landing gear manual," she recited internally. "Throttle adjustments incremental, rudder precise, hold the glide steady." The jet tilted dangerously, a sudden jolt throwing her slightly off balance. Instruments flashed warnings, the auxiliary hydraulics protested with squeals and groans. Sparrow's hands were a blur on the controls, her muscles taut with tension. Yet her voice over the comms remained calm, almost serene, maintaining approach. Manual systems stable. Sparrow. Behind her, the F-22 pilots exchanged uneasy glances. She's holding it," one whispered. "She's actually holding it." The wind picked up again, whipping across the desert in unpredictable gusts, testing every correction she made. The F-15 pitched slightly, then stabilized under her careful command. Every adjustment was calculated, measured, a delicate negotiation with physics, metal, and the unforgiving sky. Radio chatter from her squadron continued, mostly anxious and incredulous. Harris's voice cut through once more, sharp and desperate. "Matthews, you're going to kill yourself." Sparrow didn't respond verbally. She didn't need to. Her eyes were fixed on the runway, every line, every light, every inch of asphalt burning into her mind. The ground grew larger, more detailed, the base waiting silently. She began shallow turns to align perfectly, anticipating the plane's resistance at each correction. "Adjust left, slight right, throttle, hold steady," she whispered. Each micro-command was a lifeline, a conversation with the stubborn metal beneath her. Sparks flickered faintly from a panel as the auxiliary system strained to respond. The jet groaned but obeyed inch by inch under her command. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the engine's adrenaline coursing like molten fire through her veins. Every second stretched, the runway still miles away, the desert still endless below, and yet she remained calm. Fear was a distant echo. Focus, control, survival. These were the only things that mattered. The F-22 pilots adjusted their formation, creating a protective arc around her as she executed her final descent. Even they could not intervene, could not guide her, but their watchful presence was a tacit acknowledgement. She was extraordinary. Sparrow's hands flew over the manual override, fine-tuning each surface, adjusting throttle and rudder with the precision of a pianist playing a complex, perilous concerto. The aircraft quivered, wings trembling, alarms shrieking, but it obeyed. Slowly, meticulously, she guided the jet closer to the runway, stabilizing each wobble, each jolt. Her hazel eyes flicked between the horizon, the runway, and instruments. Sweat blurred her vision, but she didn't allow it to interfere. The runway lights stretched before her like a lifeline, each meter bringing her closer to salvation. "Steady, steady," she repeated, her mantra as much to the plane as to herself. She had been mocked, doubted, dismissed, but all that now seemed irrelevant. Only this moment mattered, only this descent, only survival and precision. The base crew held their breath as the silver jet wavered slightly, the F-15's nose dipping dangerously. Then, in a miracle of skill, she corrected it, leveling the plane with a deft adjustment, her hands trembling only slightly now with controlled effort. The runway loomed larger, the asphalt closer, every detail crisp. The final approach demanded absolute focus. The plane quivered, protesting hydraulics, stubborn flaps, and manual landing gear. Sparrow adjusted throttle, feathered the rudder, coaxed the jet forward. Sparks flew faintly, instruments blared, alarms screamed, but she pressed on. "Hold, hold, hold," she muttered. The wheels touched asphalt with a screech, a controlled skidding bounce, then settled. The F-15 rolled, every ounce of tension released. Slowly, the jet slowed to a halt. Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then radio chatter erupted, not panic this time, but awe. "Did she just land that?" "New girl, Sparrow, that was incredible." The F-22 pilots, they're stunned. Sparrow unclipped her helmet, letting her hair fall around her face. Her chest heaved, adrenaline still coursing, but her eyes shone with quiet triumph. She had survived the impossible. She had faced mechanical failure, skepticism, and fear, and emerged victorious. The F-22 pilots hovered above, slowly descending in formation. One removed his helmet, shaking his head. "I've flown with rookies before, never like this. That was flawless." Another nodded silently, eyes still on the jet. "She's a natural, and that calls sign." Sparrow's lips curved in a faint, confident smile. Sparrow, always Sparrow. The veterans who had mocked her earlier now approached, silent, hesitant, awestruck. Even Harris's smirk had vanished, replaced by incredulous respect. They had underestimated her. And now the rookie pilot had earned something more powerful than mere survival: respect. But inside, Sparrow knew this was only the beginning. The airfield was calm now, the desert silent witnesses to the miracle they had just seen. Yet every challenge, every danger, every unexpected twist in the sky was still ahead. She stepped from the cockpit, her boots clicking against the tarmac, and looked up at the endless blue. Somewhere above, the F-22 pilots remained in formation, an acknowledgement of the skill they had witnessed. Sparrow's call sign would now echo through the squadron, not as a joke, not as mockery, but as legend. The desert, vast and indifferent, seemed to stretch forever. And Sparrow knew one truth. In this world, respect is earned not through words, but through courage, skill, and the willingness to face the impossible head-on. And she had just begun to prove it. The silver F-15 came to a shuddering stop on the tarmac, its wheels screeching against the runway as sparks danced faintly from the stressed landing gear. Dust rose in thin clouds, stirred by the jet's cooling engines. Sparrow sat in the cockpit for a heartbeat, hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline, her chest rising and falling as she allowed herself a shallow exhale. Around her, the airfield seemed suspended in disbelief. No one moved at first. Not the ground crew, not the squadron pilots, not even the veterans who had once mocked her. The silence was thick, almost reverent, broken only by the faint hiss of the jet's hydraulic relief valves. Then a voice cracked over the radio, sharp with incredulity. "Matthews, did you just land that?" Sparrow's lips curved into a faint, calm smile. "Sparrow, Manual landing complete, systems stable. The F-22 pilots, still hovering above, broke formation and slowly descended. They removed their helmets, faces a mixture of awe, disbelief, and admiration. One, a tall pilot with a scar slicing across his cheek, shook his head slowly. "I've flown with rookies before," he muttered. "Never like this. Never." The other nodded, unable to speak, eyes locked on the silver F-15 that had just performed what they had assumed impossible. They had witnessed the new girl, the rookie, the one mocked endlessly, take a failing aircraft, fight hydraulics on the edge of failure, and land flawlessly. Their respect was immediate and silent, impossible to voice fully. On the tarmac, veterans who had sneered at her mere presence now approached, hesitant, uncertain. Harris, whose smirk had been a constant source of irritation, simply stared. His jaw was tight, eyes wide, and his voice broke as he muttered, I don't know what to say." Sparrow stepped out of the cockpit, boots clicking against the asphalt, her helmet tucked under her arm. Dust clung to her uniform, streaking her face with sweat, but her posture remained perfect, calm, almost regal in its precision. She met Harris's gaze without flinching. There was no arrogance, no gloating, just quiet confidence born from the trial she had just survived. One of the base commanders, a grizzled veteran with decades of service, finally spoke, voice low but commanding. "Lieutenant Matthews, that was extraordinary. I've never seen a rookie handle an emergency like that. Manual hydraulics, manual approach, landing without ejection. You've set a new standard." Sparrow nodded humbly. "Thank you, sir, just following procedures and training." Her words were simple, but the gravity of her achievement was evident. Ground crews began moving toward the jet to assess the landing gear and hydraulic systems, while nearby pilots whispered amongst themselves. The story of Sparrow, the rookie who had landed a failing F-15, spread rapidly. One of the F-22 pilots approached, removing his helmet completely. His dark eyes scanned Sparrow from head to toe, then landed on her hazel eyes, burning with calm intensity. "You didn't just survive up there," he said slowly. "You commanded it. We've flown with some of the best in the Air Force, and you just made us rethink what a rookie can do." Sparrow inclined her head slightly. "Just Sparrow," she replied softly, letting her call sign speak for her. The pilot's lips curved into a small smile. "Sparrow it is, and trust me, you've earned it. The rest of us will be talking about this flight for a long time." Meanwhile, the veterans who had mocked her earlier shifted uncomfortably, a mixture of shame and newfound respect on their faces. They had underestimated her skill, her composure, and her courage. Now, all that remained was acknowledgement, and perhaps a grudging admiration. Harris, finally regaining some words, muttered, I don't think anyone's ever done that." His voice was quiet, almost reverent, the mockery gone, replaced by awe. Sparrow remained calm, letting the adrenaline fade gradually. Her heart still raced, but she could finally feel the release of tension, the knowledge that she had survived what most would have called impossible. The F-15 had obeyed her commands, the emergency protocols had held, and she had brought the aircraft to the runway safely. As she walked toward the squadron, she noticed the F-22 pilots still in formation nearby, watching her with a mix of respect and curiosity. Their postures were relaxed now, but the admiration in their eyes was unmistakable. Sparrow had not only survived, they had witnessed the birth of a reputation that would precede her. On the tarmac, the crew chief approached, a wiry man with grease-streaked hands and a face lined by years of service. "Lieutenant Matthews," he said quietly, almost reverently. "That was, I don't even know what to call it. A miracle, skill, both. Either way, you just saved this jet. Maybe your career maybe lives, and you did it in style." Sparrow gave a small nod. "Just doing my job, Chief." The crew chief shook his head. "No, Lieutenant, you did more than that. You proved something. Everyone up here doubted the new girl, now everyone knows. Sparrow isn't just a call sign, it's a statement." As she removed her helmet and adjusted her jacket, Sparrow glanced at the distant mountains framing the desert horizon. The sun was high now, glaring off the polished jets, the F-22s still hovering, observing. She knew this was only the beginning. Every sortie, every mission, every challenge ahead would now be measured against her skill, her composure, her courage. And above all, she knew this. They would never underestimate her again. The whispers on the base grew louder, now filled with awe instead of derision. "Did you see that landing? She actually did it. The new girl Sparrow, she's incredible." Even the F-22 pilots, who had trained with elite forces and faced dangerous combat scenarios, recognized her skill. One called over comms, voice steady and respectful. "Sparrow, maintain formation protocol for post-flight debrief. You just earned the attention of everyone up here." Sparrow's lips curved in a faint smile. She had faced mechanical failure, skepticism, and fear, and had come through. The desert had witnessed it. The F-22 pilots had witnessed it. And now the base, once filled with mockery, was learning her name with respect. Yet even in triumph, Sparrow's mind was focused. She knew this was just one flight. One emergency survived. One test completed. Real challenges, real danger were still ahead, waiting in the endless sky. The F-15's engines hissed as they cooled. Sparrow unbuckled her harness, sliding out of the cockpit, boots clicking firmly against the tarmac. Around her, eyes followed her every step. The new girl had become a symbol, not just of skill, but of determination and courage. And somewhere deep in the sky, the F-22 pilots radioed again, this time as acknowledgement and challenge combined. "Sparrow, you've earned our attention. But next time we'll see if you can keep up under combat conditions." Sparrow looked up at them, calm, resolute. "Copy that, Sparrow." The word carried weight now, a call sign transformed from nickname to legend. Those who had mocked her would remember it. Those who had doubted her skill would now respect it. And she, Lieutenant Rachel Matthews, known simply as Sparrow, had only just begun to soar. The hangar was alive with murmurs, the low hum of engines now replaced by a charged, electric energy. Sparrow walked through the center, boots echoing against the polished concrete. Mechanics paused mid-task, pilots straightened instinctively, and even senior officers, some grizzled with decades of service, stopped to watch. Word had already spread across the base. The rookie, Lieutenant Rachel Matthews, call sign Sparrow, had landed a failing F-15 flawlessly under extreme emergency conditions. Whispers followed her like a shadow. "Did you see that landing?" She handled hydraulics manually, flawlessly. "The F-22s are still talking about it." Sparrow's face remained calm, composed. There was no gloating in her step, no swagger in her movements, only quiet confidence. She had survived, and now the weight of her achievement settled into the tense air around her. The commanding officer, a tall man with a voice that could command both respect and fear, stepped forward. His eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned Sparrow from head to toe. "Lieutenant Matthews," he said, voice firm yet carrying a hint of admiration, "word has reached me. Your actions today extraordinary. You have not only demonstrated skill under pressure but composure and judgment beyond what we expect from a rookie. You've earned our attention and our respect." Sparrow inclined her head slightly. "Thank you, sir. Just following training and procedures." The officer's lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly. "Call it modesty or call it professionalism," he said. "Either way, you've made an impression that will be remembered across this base and beyond." The F-22 pilots reported your performance directly. They were impressed. Even the pilots who had mocked her, including Harris, had stopped their teasing. Their expressions now reflected a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Some muttered to each other, "She really did it. She's incredible. The new girl, Sparrow, I can't believe it." The F-22 pilots descended in formation, landing nearby, their helmets under their arms. One of them, a veteran nicknamed Raptor, approached Sparrow with deliberate steps. His eyes, dark and measured, locked onto hers. Lieutenant Matthews, he said, voice calm yet commanding respect, you've redefined expectations. That was not just survival, it was command. The way you handled the hydraulics, the approach, the landing, we've never seen anything like it. Sparrow's gaze met his evenly. Thank you, sir. I just followed my training. Raptor shook his head almost incredulously. Call it what you want. That was flawless. You've got skill, nerve, and calm under fire. That combination doesn't come around often. Whispers spread among the gathered pilots and ground crew. The F-22s, elite warriors of the skis, had witnessed a rookie not merely survive but master a situation they themselves would have considered deadly. The hangar, once filled with casual mockery, now radiated a quiet awe. The commanding officer clapped his hands lightly, bringing attention back to the center. Lieutenant Matthews, the Air Force has protocols for extraordinary actions like this, he began. We will be conducting a full review of your flight and I expect commendations to follow. But more than awards, you've earned something that can't be bestowed on paper. Respect. The attention of elite pilots. The knowledge that you can handle the impossible and come out not just alive but triumphant. Sparrow nodded, her hazel eyes steady, absorbing the weight of the moment. She had faced fear, mockery, and mechanical failure, and now the reality of her achievement began to sink in. She was no longer just the new girl. Sparrow was a force in her own right, someone who could command attention simply by being exceptional. Across the hangar, the F-22 pilots exchanged silent glances. Their expressions were almost reverential. They had flown with the best, fought in exercises and simulations that pushed the limits of human skill, yet Sparrow had made them pause, rethink, and acknowledge a rookie's extraordinary talent. Raptor's voice broke the silence again. Lieutenant Matthews, Sparrow, he said, carefully choosing his words, I don't know if you understand the impact of today. What you did, it's going to be studied, analyzed. You've set a new standard for emergency procedures, for composure, for skill under pressure. We'll be talking about this flight for a long time. Sparrow remained calm, accepting the acknowledgement with quiet dignity. She had not sought recognition. She had only sought to survive, to prove herself not in words but in actions. And now, the validation came not as applause but as a tangible shift in perception, a recognition that her skill was undeniable. Harris, the pilot who had mocked her relentlessly, finally approached. His posture was hesitant, eyes avoiding hers at first but then locking on Sparrow's steady gaze. I underestimated you, he admitted, voice low. Completely. That landing, what you did, I can't even. Sparrow interrupted softly but firmly. Don't worry about it, Harris. Just make sure you keep up next time. A faint smirk appeared on his face, a shadow of his previous arrogance, replaced now by respect. The hangar murmured in acknowledgement, mockery replaced by admiration, skepticism replaced by acknowledgement of the impossible. As Sparrow moved to debrief with the commanding officer, the F-22 pilots lingered nearby. Their gaze was both watchful and approving, a subtle challenge and a promise. Sparrow had proven herself once, but they all knew the skis would demand more, and Sparrow would answer. The pressurized hangar doors echoed shut behind her as she entered the debrief room. Screens lit up with telemetry from her flight, altitude, airspeed, hydraulic pressure, all marked by spikes of near catastrophe. Sparrow studied them with the same precision she had shown in the air, noting what had worked, what had almost failed, and what she could improve for next time. The commanding officer pointed to the screen, his finger tracing the line of her emergency descent. Look at this, he said. Every adjustment you made was precise. Every correction saved the aircraft. Every decision you made in those critical seconds was textbook perfect. And yet most rookies would have ejected instantly. You didn't. You took control. You commanded the impossible. Sparrow nodded slowly. Every training drill, every simulator, it prepared me for that. I just applied it when it mattered most. One of the F-22 pilots interjected, voice measured and commanding respect. Lieutenant Matthews, Sparrow, You've not only earned our respect, but you've also shown what a rookie can achieve when skill, courage, and composure align. We will be recommending you for advanced missions, specialized training. The opportunities ahead of you are extraordinary." Sparrow's gaze met theirs evenly. "I'm ready for it," she said. Her voice was calm, confident, yet carried the weight of experience already earned. The hangar buzzed again, the energy different now, charged not with mockery but with awe and anticipation. Sparrow's legend was no longer whispered or doubted. It had arrived, fully formed, recognized by the veterans, the elite, and those who had once dismissed her. Yet even as recognition settled, a flicker of tension remained. Sparrow knew this was only the beginning. The skies above held challenges she had yet to face, real combat, real emergencies, real tests of skill and nerve. Today, she had survived and excelled. Tomorrow, she would be measured by even higher stakes. And deep in her mind, a singular thought persisted. They will never underestimate Sparrow again. And neither will I. The sun had begun to dip low over the Arizona desert, casting long, dramatic shadows across the tarmac. The heat of the day lingered in the air, mixing with the residual hum of engines cooling from the morning's extraordinary events. Sparrow stood near her F-15, helmet tucked under her arm, boots scuffing lightly against the concrete. Around her, the base had transformed. Where mockery and doubt had once lingered, there was now awe, respect, and an unmistakable hum of anticipation. Word of her flight had spread like wildfire. Pilots who had once laughed at the new girl now whispered her call sign with reverence: Sparrow. The elite F-22 pilots, still in formation above, had watched every second, their expressions etched with disbelief and admiration. For them, Sparrow was no longer a rookie. She was a benchmark, a standard of composure and skill that even veterans could respect, perhaps fear in its precision. A small group of cadets approached her, hesitant, eyes wide. "Lieutenant Matthews, Sparrow," one said, voice trembling slightly, we watched everything. You landed that F-15 manually. The hydraulics were failing. You didn't just survive, you controlled it. You inspired us all." Sparrow's hazel eyes softened slightly, meeting their gaze. "Thank you," she said quietly, letting her calm demeanor speak louder than words. "Remember this, skill isn't about luck. It's about preparation, focus, and staying calm when everything around you tries to break you. You all can do this too, if you trust your training and yourself." Behind them, Harris finally approached. His usual smug grin was gone, replaced by something rawer, a mix of humility and awe. I owe you an apology," he muttered. "I mocked you. I doubted you. You just showed me what real skill looks like." Sparrow inclined her head, acknowledging him. "No hard feelings. Just remember this lesson. It's not about proving yourself to others. It's about proving it to yourself when it counts most." Across the tarmac, the F-22 pilots landed smoothly, stepping from their sleek jets with measured poise. Raptor, the pilot with the scar, approached Sparrow, his boots echoing against the concrete. "Lieutenant Matthews," he said, tone even, commanding respect. "You've earned more than admiration today. You've earned a place in discussions we have among our peers. Your flight is going to be studied, referenced, and used to train others. That manual landing, what you accomplished, that's rare, even among seasoned pilots." Sparrow nodded. "I just did what I had to do. No one else was going to." He shook his head. "You understand, don't you? Most rookies would have ejected. They would have panicked. You didn't just survive, you led the aircraft to safety. You turned a disaster into a demonstration of mastery. That's not something we see every day." The commanding officer approached, walking briskly but with a measured air. "Lieutenant Matthews, today's flight has already made waves," he said. "You've earned commendations that will follow in official channels, but more than that, you've earned a reputation, one that will precede you. The base, the F-22 squadron, the Air Force, it will now know the name Sparrow." Sparrow's gaze swept across the assembly of veterans, cadets, and elite pilots. She felt a surge of emotion, not pride, not arrogance, but something deeper, recognition. A lifetime of rigorous training, tireless effort, and countless doubts had culminated in this moment. She had faced what seemed impossible and emerged unscathed, her skill and composure undeniable. The airfield was quiet now, a soft hum of engines in the distance, the golden light of sunset painting the desert in shades of fire and amber. Sparrow allowed herself a rare, fleeting smile. This was her moment, brief, poignant, but deeply powerful. She had not only survived, she had triumphed. The F-22 pilots exchanged glances, then Raptor spoke again. "Lieutenant Matthews, Sparrow, if you ever want to fly with the best of us, consider this an invitation. Not many earn it, and few are still on their first real sortie under extreme conditions. You've proven yourself today." Sparrow's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. "I'll be ready," she said. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Every pilot knew readiness wasn't just about skill, it was about courage, focus, and the ability to face fear head-on. Sparrow had all three. The base commander's voice cut through the moment, calm and deliberate. "Let today be remembered not just for the landing but for what it represents. Courage under pressure. Skill beyond expectation. The new generation of pilots, the ones who rise when others falter, this is what we celebrate. And Lieutenant Matthews, Sparrow, you exemplify that ideal." The crew chief, standing nearby with grease-stained hands and eyes wide with admiration, approached Sparrow and offered a rare, proud grin. "Lieutenant, that was more than skill. That was artistry. You've set a standard that others will study. You've earned respect and probably a few nervous whispers from the pilots who used to doubt you. I'll tell you one thing, today, Sparrow didn't just fly. Sparrow inspired." Sparrow looked at him, letting the weight of the acknowledgement settle. It wasn't just the landing. It wasn't just the emergency survived. It was the ripple effect, the shift in perception, the quiet awe that now surrounded her. She had transformed skepticism into belief, mockery into respect, fear into inspiration. And as the sun dipped lower, casting a fiery glow across the desert horizon, Sparrow allowed herself one final thought. This was only the beginning. The sky above held challenges she had yet to face. Real emergencies, real combat, real tests of skill and nerve awaited. But now she had proven one undeniable truth. She could rise to meet them. Above, the F-22s performed a slow, almost ceremonial flyover, a silent salute to the rookie who had bested impossible odds. On the ground, cadets, veterans, and fellow pilots watched in awe. Sparrow's call sign, once whispered in jest, now carried weight, history, and legend. Sparrow stood tall, eyes scanning the endless horizon, boots planted firmly on the tarmac. The desert wind tousled her hair as if acknowledging her triumph. She had faced fear, defied doubt, and mastered the impossible. And now the world knew her name, Sparrow. Somewhere deep within the base, the veterans who had mocked her first glanced at each other, silently admitting they had underestimated her. The F-22 pilots, elite and battle-hardened, nodded subtly, recognizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a flight that would be remembered, studied, and told for years to come. Sparrow's journey had only begun. The legend had been solidified, not through words or accolades, but through skill, courage, and an unwavering commitment to mastery in the face of impossible odds. And in the sky, where the sun met the desert horizon, the call sign Sparrow would echo forever, a reminder that even the underestimated can become the extraordinary. The final words of the day, whispered across the base and carried through the radio channels, captured the essence of what had transpired. Sparrow, the rookie who flew impossible, the pilot who earned respect, the legend begins now. And with that, Lieutenant Rachel Matthews, call sign Sparrow, walked toward her jet once more, ready for the next mission, ready for the next challenge, and ready to prove again that legends are not born. They are forged in moments of fire, fear, and unyielding courage.